Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be. You are tuning into another episode of the Daily Takeaway. This is episode 15, which is on natural disasters. I know what you're thinking. A lot of these podcasts seem to be about doom and gloom, about death and and bleakness and so on, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, yes, natural disasters are a terrible thing, but they're only so much a disaster because of this human aspect. For example, an earthquake by itself wouldn't technically be classed as a natural disaster if humanity didn't get caught up in it and we consider it a natural disaster, because the definition of a natural disaster is a lot of death caused by the natural world. So anything that involves an explosion of chemicals that kills 1,000 people is not a natural disaster by definition, because it wasn't nature. It wasn't the random events of nature that caused it. So natural disasters are just events, natural events where there's human death toll. We just happen to get caught up in it. And for example, an earthquake by itself that doesn't kill anyone isn't by definition a natural disaster. It's just a natural event. It's just an earthquake. Same thing with the 2009, is it, Indonesian earthquake, the Indonesian Sumatra earthquake near Banda Aceh that created a tsunami. A tsunami by itself, you wouldn't necessarily class as a natural disaster. It's just that people were caught up in it. People, unfortunately, people in modern life, we are detached from the world, and people did not know that the sea suddenly retreating away from the beach by a mile, and exposing sea and exposing the beach, the bare rock, a mile away from the shore, surely at some point must have appeared as a warning sign that something major is happening in the sea. I understand that curiosity is perhaps one of humanity's most endearing attributes, but that curiosity where somebody's standing on the beach going, where's the sea gone? Of course, it's curious. It's curious, and these people were wondering what's going on. And unfortunately, because they were on the beaches when the first tsunami waves rolled in, there's no way they're surviving that, because they would be dragged a mile, 2, 3, or more inland at the mercy of this relentless torrent of water. So, natural disasters are only considered disasters because of the human death toll that's attributed to them. But an earthquake by itself isn't a disaster. A volcano isn't a disaster. Pompeii was a disaster, but Vesuvius exploding itself, erupting itself, wasn't. There's like websites. Obviously, there's Wikipedia pages. There are Wikipedia pages for everything. And this particular Wikipedia page is the list of natural disasters by death toll. And it says here, the 10 deadliest natural disasters by... I'll get the video up for those that are watching. Hello, everyone. 10 deadliest natural disasters by highest estimated death toll, excluding epidemics and famines. The largest of them happened in 1931 in China, in the event the 1931 China floods, where there's an estimated 4 million people died from this one event. The 1887 Yellow River flood was 2,830,000 for the 1556 Shanxi earthquake, and 655,000 for the Tangshan earthquake. a lot. And then we've got here deadliest natural disasters by year, excluding epidemics and famines. And in recent years, we've got the 21st century list here. As of 2022, the greatest natural disaster facing the Earth right now is the European heat waves, which is still ongoing. That has killed 5,466 people. Before that was the Haiti earthquake. And before that was the Indian floods in India and Bangladesh. So it's very rare that we have natural disasters that kill a lot of people. We have to go back to 2010, where a natural disaster did kill a lot of people, and it's estimated that it killed 100,000 to 360,000 people. Haiti seems to be getting earthquakes quite frequently. It says here that this Haiti earthquake was only I say only a 7.0, but a 7.0 I believe is the threshold at which the earthquake can trigger a tsunami. And I also believe that the earthquake happened right before a hurricane came through, I think, days before. And it says here, the most recent cyclones to hit the island before the earthquake were tropical, blah, blah, blah. And I do believe that they either had heavy rains or an earthquake or some storm came through after the earthquake. So the area has already been devastated. But I don't know if it was immediately after. But Haiti, I remember charities looking to send food and help and aid to Haiti. I remember that. And before that was the 2004, here we are, the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, which, so it's 2004, not 2009, which happened off of the coast of Indonesia. And I think the epicenter of the earthquake was near a city called Banda Aceh. Yeah, southwest suburb of Banda Aceh. It was about 50 miles offshore, I believe. And I remember watching that. I used to have a YouTube video of the earthquake itself, the aftermath, the tsunami coming in, and so on. There's an Indian mystic guru called Sadhguru, who, if you know who he is, I would then you know who he is. If you don't know who he is, he's just a very wise man. And he talked about the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and earthquake. We've got Thiz Dizzle in chat. It's called a trough whenever water recedes, and you have anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes before it shows up. Yeah. My town, Santa Cruz, was hit by a couple of tsunamis when I lived there. There are more natural disasters than that. Kansas just has floods where it killed at least 30 people, I believe. Yeah, I think these tallies here right now are just the list of the winners of the year. But I remember, just to go back to Sadhguru, he was talking about the 2004 Indian earthquake, the Sumatran earthquake and tsunami, and said it's only a disaster because of the human impact, or the impact it had on human lives. How we all live on the coasts, but we, as a species now, are so detached from life, so detached from the natural world, that we didn't know that this was coming. But there would have been a time and a place many, many moons ago when, as a species, we would have known. We would have known, and would have been more observant I mean, there was a family swimming off of the coast of Banda Aceh that were interviewed in a documentary as a result of the 2004 tsunami, and they were diving and looking at fish. The day before, they said there was lots of fish, and on the day of the earthquake, they said there was no fish around. There's no life around. It's gone. Bearing in mind that they are 40, 50 miles away from the epicenter of this earthquake, the fish knew. Now, of course, the fish probably more sensitive to pressure, and the pressure wave that passed through the water probably alarmed them and scared them, and they hid wherever they go to hide. And because we aren't sensitive to that sort of thing, perhaps we're distracted by, our senses, what we see, hear, and taste and touch, that we're not really observant to that sort of sudden pressure change. So he was basically saying, if we were more in touch, then less people would have died, and we wouldn't have regarded it as a disaster. We would have just stepped back and looked at it and gone, isn't that beautiful? Because he regards like tsunamis and things as beautiful events. It's just a big wave, a big ripple caused by something that created a big ripple. And he regarded it as beautiful, and it's only sad because it killed so many. If it didn't kill anyone, then we wouldn't attribute anything negative to it, so then we could see it for what it is, some beautiful event in nature. I sort of agree and sort of don't agree, but I do find these sorts of things cool, but not the death, of course. I don't find like hundreds of thousands of people dying cool. But these are the sort of newsworthy. I mean, in the UK, 30 people dying in floods in Kansas may well come on the news. I'm not watching the news right now, but it could be on the world news. It might come up on BBC. I don't know, but I do know that the heat wave that's still ongoing in Europe isn't on the news right now because the UK, well, it is in the news, but not quite, because we're not directly involved with it, so we just don't care, it seems. The 10 deadliest earthquakes. China, 830,000. The Tangshan earthquake in China, estimated between 242,000 and 655,000. The Haiti earthquake, the Indonesian earthquake. I had two friends, by the way, one of which I talked to, who lived in Japan. He moved to Japan after school, after sixth form, and he'd been there for 10 or more years, a long time, and married a Japanese woman and had children with them. He lived in the north of the Japanese island, not too far away from Fukushima, actually. He was in the exclusion zone. He was there the day of the big Fukushima earthquake and meltdown. He described what it's like to be in an earthquake, a 9.0. I was saying earlier with the Haiti earthquake, I was looking at it going, oh, it was only a 7.0. Forgetting that in the UK, we rarely ever see an earthquake rated 5.0. A 7.0, I believe, is 100 times stronger than a 5.0. I think a 5.1 is 1 time stronger than a 5. A 5.2 is 2 times stronger, so on and so on and so on. You get up to 6, then it's 10 times stronger than a 5. 6.2 is like 20 times stronger, 6.3, 30 times stronger. You get up to 7, it'll be 100, and then that will go to 100, 200, 300 as you go through 7. Is it 10? Okay, I wasn't sure if it was single digits or double digits. I thought it was 5.2 was twice as strong. And then 6 was 10, but I could be wrong. I know that a 7.0 is significantly more powerful than so if we go 5.0, what's the symbol for that? 5.0 magnitude. So we're just googling magnitude energy earthquakes. The amount of energy released, however, is increased by a factor of 32. Looking at the same magnitudes, magnitude 6 earthquake releases 32 times more energy, 32 times as much energy than a 5.0. Okay. A 7.0 around about 1,000 times more energy. So 7.0 from a 5.0 is 1,000 times more energy. So me looking at the 7.0 going, oh, it's not that bad. I felt a 5.0, and it was rocking every now and again. You have different types of fault lines. In the UK, we're relatively lucky in that we don't have or don't live by any boundaries, any fault boundaries. We're lucky in that we're pretty much not necessarily in the center of the European plate, but we're towards the center. So we're away from the edges that grind against one another. And we have a geologist in the family and a volcanologist in the family, and it's very interesting to listen to them talk. And they would describe the different types of faults that you have. The faults are just edges of these boundaries rubbing up against one another. And you have, I believe you have strike slip. So a strike slip fault is side to side movement or lateral fault. You have a convergence, I believe, which is like what causes the Himalayas to grow. Or I'm going to have to double check for you. Strike slip normal. Reverse faults called thrust faults. So if you have a look at these images, normal fault is a slipping of up and down. A reverse fault. No, normal fault is something slipping down. A reverse fault, it says here, is something slipping up, and a strike slip is slipping from side to side. But I do also note that you have subduction zones. And a subduction zone is when one plate that's heavier and denser than the other slides underneath it. And it's got an image here, if you're looking, is thrust fault. These subduction zones, sometimes, because the sea floor or the fault because the plate that's going underneath isn't smooth. It's not like glass. It undulates. There are hills. There are harder parts, softer parts, and so on. Sometimes that subduction under the plate gets snagged, and it gets caught on something, and it doesn't move. And that pressure can build up and build up and build up until the fault slips, and you get something called a megathrust. And a megathrust event, the amount of energy released is directly proportional to the amount of the fault that slips. So the length of the fault. So it could literally be 1,000 miles of fault line gets snagged and doesn't move. In the case of Banda Aceh, I believe it was several, like 600 miles long, this fault line that got stuck. And when it slips, in the part of the fault that slips creates a cascade effect along the fault, and that then causes the adjacent areas to slip, and you'll have an earthquake that just travels along the fault line from the origin point until an area where it snags again, or all of the energy is released and and everything's hunky dory. So in the case of Banda Aceh, the fault, I believe, the earthquake lasted 9 minutes. I'm going to have to double check that was the case. How long did the Indian earthquake last for? And I'm gonna have to. How long did the Indian earthquake last? Between 8 and 10 minutes. Yeah, so I thought it was 9 minutes. I thought they said 9 minutes. So what's happening there is along that fault line, the Sumatran fault. If you've heard of the Ring of Fire, then you know Indonesia just has tons of earthquakes, because there are a lot of plates subducting under one another, and that creates perfect environment for explosive volcanoes. Same process that's making those volcanoes can also cause earthquakes. So this subduction zone, for 9 minutes, the earthquake ran up the fault line along Sumatra. Hello, Paddy, and hello everyone from Paddy's stream. How are you? I'm just talking about right now the Indian earthquake, and we're talking about earthquakes and their severity at the moment, because I said earlier that one of the greatest disasters of the last 20 years was the Haiti earthquake, and it was only a 7.0. And I'm saying to myself, oh, it was only a 7.0. Well, the largest earthquake we've ever felt in the UK was the North Sea earthquake in the UK, I think. I can't remember. I'm gonna have to. Which was about a 5.0, where it's 1,000 times less power than the one that happened in Haiti, and the one that happened in Haiti is over 1,000 more than the one that happened in India. And the one that happened in India, that earthquake lasted for 9 minutes. Can you imagine just shaking around constantly for 9 minutes? Whereas in the UK, I've felt 2 earthquakes while laying in bed, and they happened sometime last year or the year before. And it felt like someone ran under my bed and shook the bed quickly. And I was like, what was that? And then I went back to sleep. Happened again a week later. They were only 3.0. But I'm laying in bed, and it just went... and it woke me up thinking, the hell's just run under my bed? So imagine shaking for 9 minutes. And the reason why it went on for 9 minutes is because the earthquake was a megathrust event. As I'll quickly go through, a megathrust is just it's got here types of fault, a thrust fault, which is one sliding under the other. You have subduction zones on the edges of the continental plates. One will slide down below the other because it's heavier and denser, so it slips under the other. Sometimes through that process of slipping, it gets caught, and it causes the one on top to buckle, but only God knows when the top one will fling back and retain its shape. That can happen at any moment. And in the case of the Indonesian earthquake, that snapping back will occur all the way along the fault line. And it did that for 9 minutes. And as that's happening, there's an earthquake occurring all the way down the line for 9 minutes. So it's just constant shaking. And I asked my friend who was in Japan for the Japanese earthquake. He had to get out of the country because he was in the exclusion zone, the nuclear exclusion zone from the meltdown at Fukushima. The government immediately got in touch and said, you need to get out of here, and they left the country. He described what it was like in a 9.0 earthquake for him, and he says it's impossible to stand up. It's impossible for you to be on your feet because you're just thrown around constantly in all different directions, and you just have to lie down or you'll fall down. And although that's scary, I would still love to experience that. La Palma potential disaster and the Yellowstone ones are the most interesting ones to me. Same here. La Palma is a volcanic island off of the west coast of Africa, and it's a volcanic island, a hotspot, I believe. And the volcano was active recently, but what they are worried about is that along the line of volcanoes, the new volcanoes on the south of the island, is that they think there's a crack or something along the length of the island that will cause a landslide. And if that landslide does occur, they say it will be one of the biggest tsunamis ever that they've seen. And the problem here is that it's pointing towards the Americas. And what you can see in these photographs is that there have already been landslides. This here has already been a landslide. They've already had a large portion of the volcano just crack and fall down into the sea. So there's already been one of these, but they think this is nothing compared to what will happen down here, where they think part of the island will just fall into the sea. And if we look at Google Maps, for example, at La Palma, and they've modelled this, right? La Palma is, where is La Palma? Is it over here? I can't remember where La Palma is. We'll Google it. La Palma. Here we go. I was looking at it. So the island will just fall into the sea, splash westward. And what is westward is just all east coast of the United States, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, east coast of South America. They think that it could be one of the worst natural disasters that the world will see, because mega tsunamis caused by landslides make it's hard to describe, but generally speaking, in a megathrust earthquake, it can be tens of meters of sea floor that are risen, just because of the sudden rising of the sea floor, and then all of that water above it is then displaced. This could dislodge, several hundreds of meters of water above it, or more, and just thrust it all forward, the entire island, and then just shove it towards the United States. Think of how unprepared New York, Miami, low-lying cities that are only, a couple of feet above the water. Miami would just, the eastern seaboard, it's just completely populated all along the eastern seaboard. Just city after city, Norfolk, New Jersey, Atlantic City, New York, it would be, a lot of people lose their houses. It's terrible. But yeah, I remember a 9.0 earthquake. The Indian earthquake went on for 9 minutes. San Francisco is under threat of the big one. I think San Francisco, I think they call it the big one, something like that. They fear the big one. Will the big one happen in San Francisco? The threat of earthquakes extends across the entire San Francisco Bay region, and a major earthquake is likely before 2032. These processes that occur, like the geological processes, can be quite reliable, but at the same time, it's random. We don't know when something will fracture. And they run this experiment, for example, earthquake fracture experiment. It's the same thing as predicting when your fingers will click. As my fingers are too dry. Basically, it's being able to predict the exact nanosecond your fingers will come apart after you try to click them. You only know after the fact. You can go now, but you're never perfect. It's being able to predict that friction, when friction will give way. And it's impossible for them to predict because all of these processes are going on underground. And so they don't know when the faults are going to give. And so San Francisco has this big threat looming over them that at some point they're going to have an earthquake. And at some point it's going to be 7.0 or above. And the earthquakes, again, aren't the only source or the only natural disaster. We had Thiz Dizzle in here earlier talking about floods in the Americas right now. Yellowstone is another one. Big T Design saying Yellowstone is very well known for what the 2012 film showed. However, Lake Toba supervolcano is the same. Yeah, Lake Toba. Isn't that in India? Lake Toba. Isn't that in New Zealand? Or is it in Sumatra? Ah, no, you're right. It's in Sumatra. You're right. Tombora is the one I'm thinking about in New Zealand. That's the one I fell down. Lake Toba. The lake itself is the caldera. Water has rushed in and filled up the caldera. What is a caldera? A caldera is basically a depression. Like when you pop a spot or something. And then all that pus that was in there is now deflated. It's like the area deflates and then sinks on itself, and it's usually because the lava chamber below the Earth's surface has expelled a lot of its lava. So that volume that used to be like an underground zit has now gone, and the land bridge above. I'm going to draw this actually because it's really interesting. I'll draw it for you. So for those that are watching, you get to see some of my crude drawings. So, for example, let's get a nice earthy brown color, right? And we'll just say that. Oops, no, I want the whole thing. Here we go. So this is the Earth, and underneath we're just going to do some nice red lava chamber, which will be something like they're not perfect shapes, okay? So do please forgive. So what we're gonna do is just color in this area and make it look a bit lava-y. Why is it on multiply? Right, so this is the lava chamber underneath the Earth, and on top you will have then a volcano like so. It might not necessarily be conical. In the case of Yellowstone National Park, cone volcanoes generally form under subduction zones because of the lava that's produced. It's very viscous, so the lava doesn't really escape far from the vent, and it falls down the flanks and solidifies. It chokes the vent, and then that pressure from the lava chamber below increases over time, and it's like popping a cork off of a wine bottle. It suddenly explodes, and it explodes violently. So you have sort of the main conduit, I should say, from the lava chamber. Oh crap! Why? How have I got to? How do I get back? Oh, there we go. How the hell did that happen? I'm so sorry. So you have the lava chamber below and then the volcano above. When the lava chamber below the surface empties, if you imagine this whole area that had something supporting all of this land above it. So I'm gonna mark in white here. 10. All of this land above it will now no longer be supported. The gravity will no longer be supported by the lava chamber, if that makes sense. So when this empties, when this becomes empty, it's a void of space. So then all of this lava, all of the land bridge will just collapse down. And then this will create what's known, well, you'll eventually have something that will look like this, that the land will just sink like that. Because everything above it has just fallen down and filled up this space. That makes sense. And this is called a caldera. These are called a caldera forming eruption. So I'll get the name for you. Caldera forming eruptions. Is a cauldron-like hollow that forms shortly after emptying the magma chamber in a volcanic eruption. Here we've got some better graph here. Let me zoom in. So you've got the lava chamber and the volcano, eruptions, ash and pumice, caldera collapse. The land bridge above slips into the magma chamber. Steam explosions, big eruptions, fill with water, and then that's how you have Lake Toba, essentially. Getting edged by a volcano hooker. You're disgusting. Verdansk. Not all eruptions cause calderas, but if you've seen recently in the news, Krakatoa, of the volcano Krakatoa, or Anak Krakatoa, recently blew itself to smithereens. Krakatoa itself had a caldera-forming eruption where the island itself, that was above the sea, fell into the sea. Because of the big eruption, the island just went plonk and disappeared beyond view as it blew itself to smithereens. It emptied. David Attenborough talks about it in one of his shows. He says, on the August, was it August the 6th or something? In 1883, there was an eruption. The violent eruption was so loud that the sound was heard 3,000 miles away on the island of Rodriguez, which is if I get you the map here, Krakatoa, I believe, is halfway between Sumatra and somewhere in here. Here we are. I think this is it. Yeah, Krakatoa here. This tiny island between Sumatra and Indonesia, right here. That exploded, and somebody sat the island of Rodriguez, Mauritius. Is this right? Yeah, island of Rodriguez. So, like 3,000 miles away, heard that explosion. And it turns out that the volume of that explosion was, if you were 100 miles away from this volcano, it would have sounded as loud as a jet engine. That's how loud it was. Recently, there was a volcano that blew up that created an even louder noise. And that is on YouTube. I'm going to try and get it for you. If you heard it on the news recently, volcanic explosion caught on tape. What was the most recent one that blew up? Was it Tonga? Was it Tonga? Tonga. Yeah, here we are. Sonic boom from Tonga. Tonga. These guys are so far away that they don't see the eruption. Although up here, these clouds, I think, are possibly the top of their plume. But the volcano is well over the horizon. So this is the noise. I'm going to turn it up. So those of you that are wearing headphones, be warned. This is going to be a big, loud noise. So brace yourself.
Check all of that out. Oh, fuck! Holy shit!
Money. Satu. Ya pula money.
Fuck! Alu! Alu!
Quite loud. And they're probably 100 miles away. If we go onto maps, they were on one of the distant islands. So let's go to Tonga. So here's Tonga, one of these islands over here. And I think they were in Fiji. So how far away, measure distance from Tonga to Fiji? They were 400 miles away. My search hit 400 miles away. Bam. And that's still that loud. That's a massive explosion. Massive explosion. Hello, everyone. I have such a morbid fascination with this sort of stuff, but this bears listening to again. Remember, they're 400 miles away.
Check all of that out.
They've got the blue sky between them.
Oh, fuck! Holy shit!
Money. Satu. Ya pula money.
Fuck!
Mad. And I can imagine there are a lot of deaf people in Tonga because of this, having received, permanent eardrum damage from that explosion. But I remember the statistic that when Krakatoa blew up in 1883, the eruption emptied all of the lava in the magma chamber below the surface. And because of that, the lava bridge above couldn't be supported by the magma chamber anymore. So the the land bridge collapsed. So all of that water and all of that, millions of tons of sand, rock, and millions of tons of water fell on the red hot magma in the lava chamber below, miles below, and created an enormous steam explosion as that water instantly vaporized as it hit. And that created the huge explosion that was heard around the world. And the shockwave is said to circumnavigate, to go around the Earth in complete rotations 7.5 times before it died down. So the shockwave just repeated around the Earth 7.5 times before it died out. That's how loud this thing was. And again, the volcanic eruption itself wouldn't necessarily be classed as a natural disaster if it didn't kill anyone. It would just be a volcanic eruption. Big T Designs talks about other threatening ones. So we've got Yellowstone National Park, which is always in the news. It's always in Hollywood. Yellowstone National Park is a supervolcano. It's a supervolcano because underneath the park there's a huge reservoir of magma, one of the largest reservoirs of magma on Earth. And so far there's no signs that this volcano is erupting, but it does erupt sort of on a time scale of several 100,000 years, and it repeats. It's moving along because the hot spot, as you hear here, is moving. It's not moving under the surface. The plates are moving across it. Super eruption. You're disgusting. And as the plates move over this sort of magma chamber over millions of years, the scars of that sort of volcano or the lava chamber are shown by big cold era forming eruptions. Same thing happens with Hawaii. I want to show you. Hawaii is a hot spot. So if I get the map Maps up again, and we zoom out. And we show you Hawaii from a satellite view. Here we see Hawaii currently here. And then you have a long chain of islands that extend west-northwest, far across to the west. And you've got an atoll here. These atolls are previous volcanoes that are being claimed by the sea. And they're of coral and things, and they're just the outline of the volcano. And these atolls extend further and further west, and then they suddenly go north up to Russia. What's happening, what you're seeing here, this line, is a history of the hotspot. But it's the history of the Pacific plate moving over this hotspot that's stationary. So the hotspot's just staying here, but the Pacific plate is moving southeast. So the Pacific hotspot is moving from west to east, and as it does so, it's leaving a trail like a snail does of old volcanoes left by the hotspot. Hawaii is a hotspot, Yellowstone's a hotspot, La Palma's a hotspot, and there are loads of, I think there are a few others, but I can't remember where they are. He also talked about Toba, Lake Toba. Lake Toba is the site of a super volcanic eruption, like less than 100,000 years ago. Yeah, here we go. 69,000 years ago and 77,000 years, somewhere in between there. And it's got a VEI index, which is a volcanic explosivity index. Basically, what that's saying is how much material the volcanoes put into the atmosphere. And VEI8 are the largest. It's got here, they are mega colossal. Up to 20, well, it says here, plume up to 20 kilometers high, happens every 50,000 years. The tropospheric injection says vast. Tropospheric injection is just material put into the troposphere. The stratospheric injection, same thing. And what it's got here is the amount of volume released, and we're looking at up to 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. People often will have difficulties sort of visualizing how much is 1,000 kilometers being shoved up into the air. Well, in recent history, there have been several volcanic eruptions which have produced a lot of ash, and one of them is Pinatubo. Mount Pinatubo. I was young when this was going on. I was 8. This isn't Mount Pinatubo. This is a lie. I believe this is. I think this picture I remember seeing from NASA of a Russian volcano. So that's clickbait. There's a documentary here, In the Path of a Killer Volcano, Mount Pinatubo. And I believe that might be by the History Channel. And they document the volcano waking up. And they refer to the early eruptions as like vent clearing phases or throat clearing. Because scientists and volcanologists and geologists will always be asked, is that the big one? Is that the big one? Because usually when a volcano that's on a subduction zone, like Mount Pinatubo, you've got a good volcanic eruption. You better do. I was talking to you earlier about subduction zones. Subduction zones, which is you've got a picture here of one of the Earth's continental plates slipping under the other. When that happens, a lot of water and moisture is then taken deep into the earth, and there's a point where that water then turns to steam, and it changes the consistency of the magma, and it has more silicate in it, it has more sand, it has more solid in it, so it's more viscous. And when you have viscous lava, when the eruptions are flowing, the lava can flow freely, and although they are explosive, they just explode. They flow freely. When the lava conduit, which is like from the surface down to the magma chamber, cools and solidifies, it chokes the vent. And when it chokes the vent, the pressure of that magma, all of the gas coming up from the magma chamber, has nowhere to go. So it tries to squeeze outwards, but the weight of the volcano prevents that. Something has to give. And in that process of giving, Mount St. Helens is the best example of that process. Mount St. Helens eruption. This is, I don't want to have the audio on. So if we want to check pictures, here we go. So this is Mount St. Helens. Scientists, the thing with Mount St. Helens was, if you imagine underneath the ground, there's a conduit, a channel of magma that's leading to the magma chamber below. Well, that's all choked off. So because it can't go up, it's trying to go sideways. Excuse me. And in the case of Mount St. Helens, over the coming weeks before the eruption, they saw a big bulge appear on the side of the volcano, on this side, which I think was the south flank. The south flank of the volcano. And that was the magma within the volcano trying to make its way out sideways rather than up. Because the path of least resistance in this case was weaker, or the resistance was weaker at the sides. So it then erupted, a lateral eruption rather than upwards. And that caused a landslide. The magma pressure forced the side of the volcano to give in this animation. So there are a series of photographs taken by someone, and these are morphed together to show movement. What we're witnessing here is the south flank collapsing. So it's now collapsing in the biggest landslide they've ever seen to date. And then you've got an eruption plume here. So the side of the volcano has slid off. It's now exposed the magma to the air. And this magma is like Coca-Cola, shaken up. Gas is, is ready to explode and expand. And it is doing that just here, if you're watching the video, where I'm circling my mouse around now. And then you see why are you not showing the whole thing? Why? I don't want to see this guy's face. Here we go. So we have an explosion here and at the top. But it's just erupting out the side of the volcano. This looks like animation. Fake. Well, anyway, that's not the original, so I want the original, please. YouTube. A very rare thing called a lateral flow. So I just want to watch the whole thing without. Why is it so difficult just to show the whole thing? I did loads of lateral flows. It's so immature. So they're just showing that the eruption was out sideways, which is uncommon. But so these volcanoes generally sit. You've got here volcanic arc. Generally sit about 50 miles away from the subduction zone, and you see this in Google Earth. And I'll show you Google Earth. There's one subduction zone that you want to look at that's very obvious. So we go to the satellite view and we look in the South Atlantic. And in the South Atlantic, between both Africa and South America and the South Pole, there is a big trench here, same as like the Mariana Trench. And what we've got here is I'm going to show you a little. I'm going to screenshot it and show you it in Photoshop, if I may. Oops. So I'll show you this in Photoshop, and I'm going to mark it in orange first, or yellow. So this here marks the boundary. This yellow line marks the boundary of the deepest point between one plate sliding under the other and dragging the top one. So if you imagine this yellow plate here that I'm highlighting is sliding to the west, and it's sliding under this lighter orange plate, which I'm going to mark. Yeah, mark in orange. This plate here. So the yellow plate on the right is sliding underneath the plate on the left, and along that boundary, which is, I'll mark again in yellow, along that boundary, this plate is sliding underneath, and it's dragging all the sea with it, it's dragging all water with it, it's dragging sand with it, and it gets to a certain depth where it creates this special concoction of magma, and that's about a 50-mile diagonal. Okay, it's around 50 miles. It changes depending on the rock above it, but if we measure the distance in Google Earth right now from the deep trough and the volcano itself, this is even further than that. It's 90 miles. So there's a distance away, and you see in Google Earth that there's just an entire chain of volcanoes that run parallel to the subduction zone, and these volcanoes are the most explosive, not the most dangerous, but the most explosive, because the type of magma, Hawaiian magma, is a specific type of eruption in the VEI index. I think it's called Hawaiian, actually. Yeah, classification Hawaiian. And Hawaiian, the volcano doesn't have much gas in it, so it kind of erupts slowly, like syrup. And depending on the temperature and the speed, it can flow much faster than that, but it's almost quiet. You would almost not hear it. And then, depending on how much sort of sand and so on that's in, that makes the the magma more viscous. The more viscous, the more eruptive, and the most eruptive ones are these volcanoes that are on the edges of subduction zones, and they explode like in that video you heard earlier, the Tonga. So if we actually have a look at Tonga, see where Tonga is. Tonga. See, Tonga here is, again, you see this dark region, which is a subduction zone. And that dark area is really, really, really deep sea floor that's being dragged down by the heavy, heavy Pacific plate. And you get volcanoes all along the edges. So you've got Tonga and so on. But because the Pacific is so deep, a lot of these volcanoes will be underwater. And Tonga and so on are just volcanoes that have been erupting enough for them to then deposit lava on the surface of the water and grow as an island. And this is all around. So you see all of these subduction zones. This is the fault here off the west coast of Sumatra that produced the 2004 earthquake, and that's like thousands of miles long. You got on the east side of Indonesia, you got the Mariana Islands, the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, in the sea, I should say. And yeah, the volcanoes along the edges of subduction zones are the most explosive, and those are the ones I like the most because, well, they're the most explosive, right? They're really cool. But volcanoes again aren't the only disasters. Earthquakes aren't the only disasters. You have tornadoes, hurricanes. I like them. Yeah, I too. Yeah. Flash floods. Yeah, flash floods. Droughts, wildfires. Like drought right now across the United States. Regularly I check out the Storm Prediction Center, www.spc.noaa.gov, the Storm Prediction Center for the National Oceanic and Air Administration, and they have fire outlooks. And the fire outlooks, critical fire outlooks, elevated, and they highlight areas across the United States that are in danger of having wildfires. And 2-day outlook. So right now it looks like the wildfire risks are in the northern parts of the United States, the Northwest, Seattle, Washington, places like that. And they basically, the Storm Prediction Center primarily deals with severe weather outbreaks, but they do show you risks of fire and so on, and other hazards. What other websites are there? You've got the National Geological Survey that monitor volcanoes and so on, the NGS. National Geological Society, I say, not survey, Jesus Christ. Is that right? It's survey, isn't it? British Geological Survey, USGS, there we go. USGS. And the USGS go all around the world monitoring volcanoes on a daily basis. They sometimes have videos on their cameras on there, so they can watch the volcanoes remotely. They have I can imagine it's quite boring in that in geological. Oh, gifted a sub to Big T Designs. Welcome, Big T. How big are you? 6 foot or above? 6 foot or above. Vegas is the most amazing place for water. You're joking. You're joking. What other natural disasters are there? Monsoons. The monsoon season. I wouldn't necessarily call the monsoon a disaster, but can cause flooding. Tornadoes, thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms, hurricanes, typhoons, so on and so on and so on. But welcome, Big T. Nice to have you. Nice to see you. To see you. Nice to see you. To see you. Nice. I bloody hated him. Hey, and I got a follow too. Who followed? Big T. Well, now you feel like you're compelled to follow. You're like, I have to follow because I've been subbed now. Don't want to waste that generosity. But yeah, my friend, by the way, who lived in Japan, who was there for the Fukushima earthquake. Fukushima earthquake. He was there for the Fukushima earthquake. Have you seen some of these videos of the sea walls? They believe that the sea walls were high enough to protect them from a tsunami because Japan is like, they're ready for earthquakes. But even then, watching the buildings, like some people in the buildings just like 60 stories up, just watching the other buildings just sway by one another. It just like scares the fuck out of me. That's just no way would I be up there. Fukushima earthquake, skyscrapers. This sort of stuff Just look at the building in front, just swaying. That does not look steady to me, bro. Look how much it's swaying. It's like 6 feet or more. Scary. And then someone goes walking and they just see the earth, cracks opening up in the earth and walking on them. Stop that. Imagine if that crack opened up really wide and you fell down and there you go, a couple of miles down. See you later. Like, stop that. And then the water coming out. This is, I can't remember what they call it, but the ground is being squeezed and compressed, and all of the water that's subterranean gets squeezed up to the surface, and you just see lakes appearing where there were no lakes before. Like things like that. Like, oh, is this riding over the tsunami wave? Fukushima tsunami footage. Horrible stuff. National Geographic. I want to see the seawall one. Look at it. I remember watching this live. The helicopter footage as the waves come in, just a long wave. It looks really beautiful, to be honest. So Japan is like one of the most vigilant in regards to earthquakes. So they knew within a very short space of time that earthquake had happened. But anyway, my friend, his name's Grant. Grant used to live in Japan. He's since left Japan. He had to leave because he received notification from the Japanese government that he lived within the exclusion zone of Fukushima. He basically lived within the area where there was nuclear fallout from the explosion. And so yeah, they needed to get out of there, and it cost them like £16,000 to fly out short notice to come to England really quickly. But yeah, he experienced the earthquake. He told me what that was like. He said how difficult it was to stand up. He said they received alerts on their phones that an earthquake was happening before it happened, which gave them very short amount of time to prepare. All of the contents of the house and everything were on the floor. Everything was on the floor. They were on the floor. They couldn't stand up. They couldn't do anything for 9 minutes. He said 8 minutes, I believe it was. So scary stuff. And we live in I live in a relatively safe part of the world because we are far away from the edges of the plate, so we don't need to worry about volcanoes. We don't need to worry about dangerous earthquakes. We don't have many poisonous species of animal, venomous species, I should say. We don't have big cats and anything. We're pretty safe here. You could almost say kind of boring. So, no tsunamis, earthquakes, few droughts, few wildfires. Yeah, exactly. Kind of boring. Well, we don't have big cats. I do know that we have some cats, but the only cat that I've ever heard of that was out there was when I was a kid. We were in some forest doing some scouting stuff, and there was a lynx on the loose, and they were like, and the scout leaders were just like, yeah, it'll be fine. You'll you'll earn your lynx badge. Don't worry. You'll earn your lynx badge. You'll be fine. Don't worry. Lynx hybrid shit. Tornadoes are our main one. Yeah, and our tornadoes are pitiful. Lincolnshire tornado. That's not the UK. That tornado in the thumbnail is not the UK. That's America for a start. So don't be clickbaiting. What we tend to get are crap. Why hurricanes avoid Europe? You don't want to go to Europe, mate. That's clickbaity too. Hurricanes don't avoid Europe. They're prevented from coming this way due to the Atlantic High, the North Atlantic High. During the summer months, there is an area of high pressure that forms over the North Atlantic that's pretty much there permanently. And as so, hurricane, I'm going to tell you a picture, right? I'll show you a picture. I'll draw you something so you know what I'm talking about. So in this picture, we've got basically the Earth, right? I'm going to draw you something. Right, I'll draw you in yellow. Usually during the summer months, we have something that looks a bit like this. We'll have a large sort of area like this of high pressure. Usually. And you have, I'll do in magenta here, you have sort of other areas of low pressure that sort of circle around the high. Because this low pressure can't penetrate the high pressure system, when you have a hurricane, it skirts along the border. So in this case, I'm just going to draw a hurricane that looks like this. This is my makeshift hurricane. I could do better than that. We'll do that. That. I haven't done better, have I? There we are. That's my hurricane. Wait, I need to do that on a separate layer. Right, there we go. There's my hurricane. And the hurricane will will form in the Atlantic, and they skirt along the high and then move around it. That's basically what happens. They don't avoid Europe. They just can't go. They can't go no. Why stop doing that? They can't go north. They can't just go straight north. Energy goes from the equators to the poles. That's the energy that they get. Energy works its way to the poles. Hurricanes would like to go north, but because the high pressure is there, it prevents them from. They just arc up the eastern seaboard, as you see. They just all follow the same path. Now let's say that high pressure system has a different shape this time. For example, the high pressure system is more eastward. Okay. Then the hurricane, which I'm drawing again really badly, can arc up before it hits the Bermudas and miss the United States completely. But let's say, for example, this high pressure is all the way over the United States. All the way over. I'm gonna warp this like this. This is the high pressure right now across the North Atlantic, covering the entire North Atlantic, and the western edges are over Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. So then when you have a tropical depression, which starts off in the Atlantic, it'll then intensify to a tropical storm, which will then intensify to a hurricane, which will then intensified, potentially on the water, how hot the water is, how favorable other conditions are, like wind shear, will become a major hurricane, and that will skirt along the south of the high pressure, and it will then move up over the United States, and the United States will get hit. But that's just one area of high pressure. For sometimes you can have several areas of high pressure, which might be like this, over Guatemala, Mexico, Cuba. But then that also means that there's a little corridor there that will funnel hurricanes straight through Cuba over Florida. So if you have tropical depressions that form in the Caribbean Sea or in the mid-Atlantic, will all move, depending on the wind conditions, up to the United States. Again, that area of high pressure over the United States can be anywhere. It could be low, it could be narrow, and it could have weird sort of shapes to it. And if that's the case, then you can have hurricanes that form along the south and hit Venezuela instead, or get close, can form off of the eastern seaboard and then move towards Spain, but don't become very intense. So if you have a look at the North Atlantic hurricane map, like a sort of collection of all of the hurricanes that you see over a large period of time, we want a bigger image than that, because that's not particularly big. Here we go. Here's a bigger image. That's not a bigger image. You see this image? It shows you the trails of all the hurricanes, and they have that sort of sweep to them, that sort of arc, because most of the time there is high pressure over the Atlantic. So when people say they avoid Europe, they don't avoid Europe like with a plague. It's just they can't reach us because of the summer high that sits over the North Atlantic. I hate posts like that. They annoy me. Bloody lying for clout. We're now in the Atlantic hurricane season. We just entered it a couple of months ago. Slow going at the moment, but August is when it starts ramping up. August, September time. They predict that we'll have a look. 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. They usually come out with predictions at the start of the year. And the start of the year for this, where's the prediction that they are predicting? The predictions are underneath. So the average over the last sort of 30 years has been 14.4 named storms. And a storm gets named rather than given numbers, because when they gave them numbers, people didn't give a shit. When they heard Tropical Depression 01345, it's on its way towards Florida, people were just like, eh. Tropical Depression 346 is now intensified in the Caribbean Sea and is working its way towards the south coast of Texas. People are like, eh. But when they were like, Hurricane Andrew is on its way, and they're like, shit, Andrew's on his way, rather than 03456, they've now designated them names, and they go through, they alternate male, female, male, female, male, female 1 year, female, male, so on the other, and then they have a list of names, and that list of names doesn't change. They only remove a name once it becomes major. Once it becomes major, like a major hurricane, they remove the name out of circulation. So you'll never get another Katrina. Because Katrina was Category 5 and hit Louisiana, devastating floods, death, everything, poverty, homelessness. So Katrina will never be used again. So the next time they get to K, it will be Hurricane Catherine or Hurricane whatever. This year, K is male. So here we go, list of retired names. I'm pretty sure Katrina's got to be in there somewhere. Yeah, Hurricane Katrina was retired in 2005. Category 5. Rita, Stan, Wilma, Dean, Felix, Noel, Gustav, Ike, Paloma. So on and so on and so on. The last one was Dorian. So every year, A will be a male name 1 year, and then female the next. Female the next. Names retired in the 2010s. That's a Dorian. Oh no, Ida. Okay. Oh, they've put it 2020s. Right. Okay, Ida was the last. Thank you for that. So yeah, so it's male, female, male. Next year it'll be female first. So this year, we have the list starting with Alex. Alex, Bonnie, Colin. Danielle next to be used. And Danielle, the storm Danielle, will be named once it becomes a tropical storm. They name the tropical depressions by the number of tropical depressions that year. So at the moment, if there's been 3 tropical storms and no depressions, then the depressions have turned into storms, and they don't get named. Well, no, they do get named. Tropical storms get named. Depressions don't. It will be Depression 4 if there's only been 4 depressions, and Depression 5. But sometimes depressions won't go anywhere. They'll just bubble up and die down. So then Depression 4 isn't guaranteed to be called Danielle if it intensifies, if there have been several other depressions before that didn't go anywhere. So it could be Depression 16 then becomes Tropical Storm Danielle. But they named them names because people, they realized people gave more, they gave more shits. They cared more. They listened more when it was named rather than a bunch of numbers. And I think they started doing that, like, I can't remember when, but before the 90s, I think. So there's been 3 total depressions, which have then become storms. So far, each depression has intensified to a storm, but no hurricanes as of yet. If we go to the 2022 typhoon season, they've had 9 depressions so far, with 2 storms, 2 typhoons, but no super typhoons. There was a Category 4 typhoon, though, which was Typhoon Malakas, or Baziang. The reason for the differences in the names is one name is given by the Japanese meteorological. I don't know, Japanese meteorological agency, JMA. Couldn't remember what the A stood for. And then the other one is probably like some Chinese or something. So they have 2 names. They should just agree on each other and just. But when do 2 countries or agencies agree with one another? So here we have a list of all of the storms and satellite photographs. This is the satellite photograph of Baziang or Malakas. Satellite image. Category 4. 5 categories. Only difference here is you can get a Category 5 But I don't understand why. I think it must be due to the overall size of the depression system as opposed to its wind speed, because sometimes they'll say super typhoon rather than category 5 typhoon. I haven't actually learned why. Difference between category 5 typhoon and category 5 super typhoon. A typhoon with a maximum sustained surface winds greater they've misspelt that. Greater than or equal to 130 knots, approximately category 5, is called a super typhoon. It still hasn't. Okay, right. Strong category 4, right. So okay, that makes sense. It needs to reach a certain threshold to be called super. I don't know why, because you could just call it category 5, and we already know that that's strong. But anyway. What other natural disasters are there that we've not discussed? I mean, wildfires, droughts. There is an interesting effect that happens with droughts. When mud dries, it creates six-sided columns about, which is really weird. Mud drying columns. Images. Yeah. Like when mud dry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could argue 6, 7, but on average about 6 sides to mud when it dries. Same thing with volcanoes. Volcanoes, like mud drying, which is uneven because the surface layer and the exposure to the air and everything, there's lots of different variables. But when you have a volcanic eruption that has produced a lot of magma, a lot of lava, and those lava flows can become several hundred feet thick. The surface layers cool very quickly and they crust over and they then insulate the inner layers. When the eruption stops, the insulated inner layers then cool very slowly and very evenly. And it's the same sort of effect that you see in mud drying, but because mud doesn't dry evenly, right? Because it doesn't dry evenly, you don't have the perfect symmetry that lava gets. When lava cools down, and I mean like evenly, the whole thing becomes homogeneous, the whole thing has the same temperature, and it cools down at the same time, you get something called basalt columns. And these basalt columns are perfect six-sided shaped columns, are much like the cracks that you see in mud, but those cracks extend to a far deeper depth because, again, the whole thing is even all around. It's all homogeneous. It's all same temperature everywhere. So they all create perfect columns like this. Six-sided columns, 1.5 feet across. This is what you can see at the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. And you can see the Giant's Causeway in Ireland because of the lava flow that was above it has been eroded away, and then it exposes these lava, these columns above it. Really pretty, if you ask me. If we go Giant's Causeway in Ireland, it's the same thing. Giant's Causeway. Lots of six-sided columns, 1.5 feet across. And this was an eruption that was like 50 million years ago or something. It's the same eruption that created Fingal's Cave. Fingal's Cave. Fingal's Cave is the same eruption that happened. If I go to Fingal's Cave, Here's Fingal's Cave. Now, if we look where Ireland is, it's the same eruption that caused all of these areas across the British Isles. Fingal's Cave is, well, it's just an island, but has a cave, and you can see from these photographs that the columns you see on the top of the island is where the lava cooled, created a crust. We're talking like, 100 feet or more, 100 feet thick. This then creates an insulation for the lower levels, the lower parts of the lava flow to cool really evenly. So you can see that after a certain point, they all just cool at the same speed. Eruption in the cave. You're fucking disgusting, you are. Save that stuff for Cards with Friends. Cards with Friends. Cards with Friends. Friend. Cards with Friends. So the top of the lava flow cooled much more quickly because it was exposed to the air, and it cooled unevenly. But beyond a certain point, that top layer insulates the heat within the flow itself. And usually when you look at a volcanic eruption, you can see those lava conduits. Exposed lava conduit. Oh, I want to see some of these pictures. Things like this. Lava tubes. But much more than that. These pictures aren't particularly large, but I will enlarge them for the viewers. So here, you can fuck off to Tibet. I would never walk across there. Not, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. But this photograph shows a man walking across a lava bridge, and this is the top of the lava eruption that's dried and cooled, and he's walking above it. Below him, there is less than 6 feet of lava that's solidified and cooled that he's walking on. And below that is a lava tube of red hot lava. Now, this lava flow isn't particularly wide. You can imagine that some lava flows can become like a mile wide. They can get a lot of lava. And if a lot of lava is produced, the lava then becomes, hundreds of feet thick. Then you have what you see at Fingal's Cave. Just a bit of lava, no issue. Giga Chad. I know, right? I'm just a little burnt. I'm still good. Lava. Here's a formation of lava tubes. It's basically cooling, and then an area inside of the cooled lava remains hot and retains its heat and can flow very quickly and cover vast distances really quickly. We're talking like 50-mile-an-hour flows, stuff like that, really fast. You can't outrun it. There's just no chance. But yeah, beautiful stuff. So that's Fingal's Cave. Fingal's Cave's off the west coast of Scotland in the Outer Hebrides, I believe. The Giant's Causeway is in Northern Ireland. Both the same eruption, but this eruption formed, millions of years ago, long time ago. We do have volcanoes in England. They're just extinct. And you can have different types of volcanoes. You have active, dormant, and extinct. Dormant is there is still a lava chamber, active lava chamber below the volcano, but there is no volcanic activity on the surface. So the heat from that lava chamber hasn't made its way to the surface. So then that's what's called dormant. Nothing's happening. The heat isn't escaping. The volcano will then become active when there is evidence of volcanology on the surface. So geysers, which are just steam, water, or geysers, wherever you're from, mud volcanoes, thermal hot springs, gas releases, sulfur dioxide releases, methane, those sorts of things. If any of that stuff makes its way to the surface, then the volcano is then considered active or waking up if it's just come out of period of dormancy. And extinct is the heat source that created the lava chamber has now ceased. So there is no lava chamber. There is no volcanic activity of any sort. It's dead. One of those in the UK is called Arthur's Seat, which is a volcano. Arthur's Seat is an ancient volcano which is the main peak of the group of hills in Edinburgh. It's not particularly impressive, if I'm being honest. It's just a hill. There you have it. It's just a hill that you could climb up. But it used to be the site of a volcano. It was an ancient volcano. But other than that, we don't have anything in the UK that's noteworthy. You know, we're lucky to see sharks around here. We don't even see that many eagles, and when we do, you have to be in Scotland to see them. Golden eagles. Apparently they have been returning, though, to Scotland, which is interesting. Why are they returning? Golden eagles are the classic symbol of wild species. Scotland holds almost all of the UK's population of these magnificent birds, which glide over forest, moorland, and mountain on long, powerful wings. I can't lie, says Mikey. I like that we don't have natural disasters here. Yeah. I mean, it's cozy, isn't it? The temperature, the weather is usually pretty nice. Usually. But the summers are getting hotter, which means that we'll get more and more thunderstorms, which means that we'll get more and more tornadoes. But that being said, we won't get powerful tornadoes, no matter how many Brits you'll talk to and be like, oh my God, we have more tornadoes per square mile than the United States and any other country. Haha, we're great. No, we don't. No, we don't. Okay, we might have it more per square mile because we're a tiny island and we have a lot of eyes. So we have a lot of people looking around at them. But in America, you can go 200 miles before you hit civilization. Or more. Across the Midwest. So there's bound to be tornadoes there that people just don't see and don't ever see. Unless they're, some gas station in the middle of nowhere. Like you can literally drive for miles across the United States and not come up to civilization at all. Here we go. What road is this? Interstate 20, Highway 70. So if we can go measure distance from here, and we're just going along the roads, zooming out even further, keep going. Longhorn Ranch. This is what you would always find. You'd drive along and you'd find one building. And sometimes the one building would have a gas station outside. And it's people's house. It's somebody's house. But they sell gas there. And you drive along and it's the only civilization. You'll see a dusty road sign being like gas and, toilet stop or something. and you pull up, and it's a husband and wife, and they're like, and you're like, hello, yeah, pump number 2, please, and they're like, "Boy, howdy, that's an interesting accent you have there." And like, "Where are you from?" And you're like, "I'm from England." And they're like, "Why the hell are you here?" Like, what the hell are you doing here? Just, I'm storm chasing. They're like, "Ah, of course you are." And that sort of it's funny. the amount of people are like, "Why the hell are you here?" Oh, it's so funny. Why the hell are you here? Get the fuck out of here. So again, another just random house, but this looks like it's just out of the way. So you go miles and miles and miles. How far have we been? We've seen 16 miles. We've seen 2 houses. It's just nothing. Nothing. A lake. Nothing. Measure distance to here. 27 miles. Nothing. Now we get to a city, which isn't that far, to be fair. It's 29 miles to Paducah. But then you leave Paducah and head north, and you've got nothing around you for just as far. You're going to outrun a tornado. Okay. Having storm chased, and I've got like 20 books on tornadoes, scientific books, photography books, that sort of stuff, books on how to photograph tornadoes, telescopic lenses if you want to be more than 3 miles away. But technically speaking, they want the best viewing distance is actually further away from a tornado. You want to be southwest. I'll show you I'll show you in Photoshop. Generally speaking, most supercells will have a classic shape to them. And the classic shape is generally something similar to something like that. Ish. Something like a kidney bean sort of shape. Supercell, classic supercell shape on radar. See, it's sort of like a kidney bean. So we'll go for this one here. Okay. Can I get this image? But it's already been marked. Okay, so I'm gonna nick this because it saves me drawing. Right. What we're looking at here is radar reflectivity. We've got XLTX radar here, or KTLX, or whichever it is. This is in Oklahoma, it seems, because we've got Norman, Oklahoma, and Moore, and Newcastle. So I think this is Oklahoma. Norman, Oklahoma, Moore, Oklahoma, Newcastle. Bridge Creek. Yeah, Bridge Creek. This was the F5 that ripped through... this must be the 1999 Bridge Creek Moore tornado of May 3rd. Anyway, I'm being totes nerdy. So you have some sort of like kidney bean shape to a tornado. So that's basically the general shape of the storm, okay? And inside here, you'll have different things going on. So for example, in the core of the storm, you will have the heaviest rain, the heaviest hail. Sometimes in between, you'll have even heavier than that. And you'll have a slight area that will have loads and loads of hail. The red area there is just like heavy rain. Okay, heavy rain. So I'm just colouring this in for those viewers at home, and and then occasionally around the outside you'll have like greens and blues. Okay, so blue. Oh shit! Shit on a stick. Oh, okay, that's it. Oops, underneath, please. And we'll do green. We'll do green. Lovely colours here, folks. Don't mind me, just colouring in. Colouring in with Crowder. Do that, okay? Something like that. This is your storm. As a spectator, there's a lot of things going on that you kind of want to avoid. So, for instance, there's a lot of wind coming into these storms, primarily here, by following this arrow. This is usually called the inflow notch. As you notice from this radar, there's a little notch. Rather than it being a nice circular shape, there's a sort of wedge that's been cut into the side. And that wedge that's cutting into the side is called the inflow notch. Here you go. Inflow of warm, moist air. Inflow notch. With a severe thunderstorm, you get a tornado or a mesocyclone forming to the southwest of that inflow notch. So usually you'll have an area around, excuse me, around the southwest that's spinning. And that spinning can drag rain around the backside, can drag, like lines of rain around the backside, can drag some of the hail in with it too, around the outside, and the overall shape of the storm changes to resemble sort of like an elongated, twisted kidney bean, which is like you've got here. It's like curled round. That tornado is called a hook echo. A hook echo is basically evidence that there's an area of stuff spinning that's pulling the contents of the thunderstorm in and around it. You want to avoid that area. I haven't finished it, it's still there. Yeah, I will do soon. I will. Anyway, you want to be about 3 miles away from this lot that's going on. Yeah, you want to be about 3 miles away. So, and the reason why you want to be 3 miles away is then you're not in any danger of any of the heavy rain. You're not in any danger of the hail. You'll miss most of the heavy lightning. And if anything does go wrong, then you have escape routes. I need to sleep. I thought you were drawing plankton from SpongeBob at first. Dearie me. Plankton from SpongeBob. Get out of it. I could do that though. The thing about tornadoes and everything like that is there are sort of landmarks in the sky that you can look at, and once you know what you're looking at, then you know what's causing them. That sort of stuff. But yeah, anyway, I suppose to go back to natural disasters, I think we've covered most of them. There is a list of natural disasters, like list of natural disasters, and it lists like 6 things. According to this website, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration are talking about natural disasters. Okay. Tornadoes and severe storms, hurricanes and tropical storms, floods, wildfires, earthquakes, and drought. Don't forget you can have landslides. You can have Avalanches. Not really sure if you can call that a natural disaster, but it is a disaster. Snow is natural, and it sliding is natural, so landslide should also be in there. Yeah. Have you got mental health issues? Let's just list off all the things that could kill you. Yeah. Human-caused disasters. Incidents of mass violence. Thanks. Incidents of mass trauma. Thanks. Disaster distress helpline. Okay. Let's skip that. So there are lots of types of disasters, and Sadhguru, who I was mentioning earlier, Sadhguru is this man. He's in Jagadish Yagi Vasudev, known by the honorific title Sadhguru, is an Indian yoga guru and proponent of spirituality. He has been teaching yoga in southern India since 1982. He established the Aisha Foundation, which operates ashram and yoga center that carry out educational activities. He's 64. He's very wise. And he was asked during one of his speeches to talk about the Indian Sumatra tsunami, and he basically said that they're only considered disasters because of the death toll, because we get caught up in these things. But it's nature being nature, and if there was no death, then we could look back from a safe distance and observe what's going on and find it beautiful, so long as people aren't dying. So they're only called natural disasters because of the death toll. But if they didn't kill anybody, then they wouldn't be called a disaster. They would just be called nature. And I think that's true. Like, we would just regard it as nature being nature, and we would watch it and film it and observe it, just like we do other things. But yeah. On that bombshell, I think I will leave this here. I have been streaming for nearly 2 hours. It's a good time to call it quits. It's also, the chat is filling up, and we can probably do some things that are more entertaining. So what I'm going to do is end it here. I want to thank everybody for popping along, and for that I need to go through Thiz Dizzle. Thank you for joining. Pads, thank you for joining and hosting. Big T Designs, thank you for popping along, sharing some of your knowledge with natural disasters as well, providing some links for me to talk about. Send Nades popping in. Who else has popped in? Kensei has dropped in to say hi. Who else do we have? I think that's it for the moment. And a couple of other viewers from Paddy's stream. Thank you for sticking around, watching, following, so on. I will quickly jump on and do something else now. So if you want to tune in, same time again tomorrow. Don't know what the subject will be, but I'll be chatting anyway. Links and everything in the YouTube video description. You have Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Twitter. I think I've already said that. I'm not sure. Amongst other things. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye. Oh, and Mikey. Mikey was also here. Special shout out to Mikey. Much more special than the others. I missed your name, Mike. I do apologize. Bye.